Hello and welcome to another online lesson. Remember from last time we ended with the assassination of JFK. Taking over him was Lyndon B. Johnson, and he takes the reins in this lesson. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to focus primarily on his domestic policy, which was known as the Great Society. And Vietnam we'll look at more in detail at another time. So when he came in, he made this statement. Lincoln abolished slavery, and we are going to abolish poverty. His goal was to help the United States get out of some of these tougher economic times. So what you're going to be looking at today, again, it's a create your own notes. So the first part, the Great Society, emphasizing the war on poverty, civil rights, and the Johnson treatment. We'll briefly mention Vietnam again. That's going to be covered at a later time. And then why he refused his nomination for re-election or to run again. So let's get started. So the Great Society, and this was his domestic policy, domestic meaning on the home front. He declared a war on poverty. He created the Job Corps. He encouraged people to volunteer in service to America. Head Start, which was used to improve education, especially for disadvantaged children. Tax cuts to spur economic growth. Federal aid to education, Medicare Act of 1965 that went along with Medicaid. Medicare was health care through Social Security, with Medicaid being financed health care for those who were living below the poverty line. And the Fair Housing Act, trying to help everyone get a home or a roof over their heads. Excuse me. He also pushed for civil rights, and this was going on at the same time. We've covered civil rights earlier in the year. I'm just going to briefly touch on a few things that he did during his tenure as president. So the Civil Rights Act of 1964, it barred discrimination against African Americans. Equal Opportunity Act made sure that no one was refused a job because of their race. The Voting Rights Act, which allowed and cemented that the African Americans had the right to vote, along with the passing of the 24th Amendment, which prohibited poll taxes. And he ends immigration quotas. He was great. Lyndon Johnson was great at getting Congress to do what he wanted. He often did this using the Johnson treatment, kind of giving him a little extra nudge, hint, hint, a little nudge, maybe by intimidation or something else, to get them to do or vote the way he wanted. And here you can see he looks pretty menacing in this picture here. So really there is debate about this Great Society. There was many good intentions, especially with getting us out of poverty, creating all these different programs. In many ways, the impact though was limited. In his rush to get as much done as he could, Johnson did not calculate exactly how his programs might work, and as a result, some of them did not work as well as people had hoped. Furthermore, the programs grew so quickly that they were often unmanageable and difficult to evaluate if they did well or they did not. People were expecting immediate life-changing benefits, and those did not come. And they left them feeling frustrated or angry. And there was also a lack of funds, which hurt the effectiveness of some of these programs. There were some that did. I mean, Head Start was successful. Medicaid is still in use today. So there were some successful parts of his Great Society. So I'm just going to scroll down. Now, foreign policy, one word, capital letters, Vietnam. And we are not going to talk much about Vietnam today. Again, like I said, we're going to cover that at a later date, so just sit tight. We're going to get to it. But Vietnam taxed him. It was a very unpopular war, especially during the Johnson administration. A lot of people were calling for him to resign, leave, and there was so much of a split between the Hawks and Doves and the home front. We'll talk about what the Hawks and Doves, or who the Hawks and Doves were, a little bit later on. And it comes down to when he's up to run for re-election again, he does not run in 1968. Vietnam taxed him. It was a very trying time and frustrating for him because it was really a war that we weren't winning or having success with. A lot of people were questioning, do we really need to be there? This is a different kind of war Vietnam was, because not everyone's behind it on the home front. And his famous quote on an address to the nation was, "Therefore I will not seek and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president." And it just kind of stands in my mind personally of him saying, you know what, it's not for me anymore. because this really took a toll on him. So we will be talking about Vietnam in class in a different type of lesson, so we'll catch that later, but we've covered, excuse me, the really big part of the domestic policy of Lyndon Johnson. Hope you enjoyed it. I will see you next time.